Welcome, Nifty Nay. You're my first repeat guest. You'll probably be my only repeat guest for a very long time to come. This is sort of a special occasion.
Cool,
Because we're IRL. We're going to do this IRL.
It's real, yeah.
And the last time we spoke, we talked about you were, again, first guest. We kind of like TLDR'd on all the different layer 2s, kind of like what is an L2, what makes a good L2. We kind of had that conversation, which was very well received. But we didn't get too much into Lightning, which is really your bread and butter. I mean, you came up in the space as a core Lightning developer at Blockstream. Fancy dev job.
Yeah, fancy dev job.
Definitely a fancy dev job. And I think that the sort of conclusion of the conversation we had was that you kind of lean still into the Lightning maximalism camp.
Definitely, yeah.
And so wanted to give the Lightning maximalists a defense, right? And kind of dig into the argument for Lightning maximalism. So I thought we would just start by talking a little bit about how Lightning came to be. I don't actually know much of the history of when Lightning was developed and who were the big players involved in bringing Lightning to the scene.
Yeah.
And I think that your personal history of how you got into the industry kind of dovetails with that. So maybe you could share a little bit of that story.
Yeah, it's actually I did a talk, I think, last summer for this project kind of run by the ETH Foundation. Venkatesh Rao is a good friend of mine. VGR.
Who is that?
He's kind of famous in the blogosphere. He goes by VGR. He used to be on Twitter. He's not anymore. He's more on Farcaster or Substack these days. But he runs this program at the Ethereum Foundation called Summer of Protocols. And he had me on, and I did a talk that was here's the history of Lightning as best as I could do it. So we'll see how much of that I remember. It has been a few months, but if people are watching and want to see more of the history, that's a good supplementary thing to check out. Yeah. But so the story of Lightning, I think, really kind of starts you through the Scaling Bitcoin conferences. Lalu and Taj Dryja, or maybe it was Taj and Joseph Poon that came up with the original idea, but the first recording talk of it, oh no, that's not true. They launched it at San Francisco BitDevs, I want to say in 2015 maybe.
Okay.
And then they started having paper talks, and Lalu was there's a video of Lalu and Taj at Scaling Bitcoin, I want to say in Tokyo or something, or Hong Kong. I don't know where it is.
Asia.
Yeah, some Asia one where they're presenting the paper and talking about it. So the idea was around for a while, starting 2015 or so.
Were they the authors? Were Lalu and Taj the authors of the Lightning paper?
Joseph Poon.
Taj and Joseph Poon were the inventors of Lightning.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. And I think one of the cool things about Lightning, at least historically, and one thing that I so occasionally I'll teach a Lightning class through Base 58, which is my engineering school for teaching Bitcoin protocols. One of the things that I'll talk about in Lightning class is how there was this idea at the time that I feel Vitalik was really leaning into, that was this idea that code is law.
Okay.
And so we're going to have...
Which is sort of still a thing in Bitcoin.
It's still a thing in Bitcoin, but I feel it got much more play and marketing over more on Ethereum. This is we're going to have DAOs, we're going to take contracts and we're going to write them into the chain. And if you have a problem and you have to go to court, the blockchain will be the one to figure out what should have happened in any situation.
So code is law, not just for money, but for life.
Exactly.
Everything.
Yeah.
We're going to jurisdiction.
We're going to build DAOs, which are decentralized autonomous organizations instead of businesses. And we won't have contracts written in paper. We'll have contracts written in code, and how that gets handled, et cetera, will all be in the contract, right? So I like to think that this is kind of where Lightning came from. And this is how they were going to build the layer 2. And the idea was that Lightning is going to be, we're going to have these contracts in Bitcoin, and we're going to write it into that's going to open the channel. And then we're going to have updates to the channel about who owns the money, and that won't be on the chain. And we'll only have to go to the chain if there's a problem later at the point, if we later can't decide who owns what money. So we'll have a private relationship about the money in the channel with Lightning, based on this one public starting contract that we put in chain that's the channel open. And then if there's ever a dispute or whatever, we can take our pieces that we've negotiated privately to chain, and the chain will be the judge that figures out who's right and who's wrong and who gets the money out of the thing at the end of the day.
So another way of thinking about that is, the L2, the layer 2, is a private channel where people can just have private agreements about who owns what. But if that agreement ever needs to be mediated, then the layer 1 is the mediator.
And that's how you scale it, is that you take that, instead of having every transaction be like publicly recorded and like the general ledger that everyone can see, it's now this private negotiation that if at some point the two of you disagree or can't come to agreement about, you have an arbitrator, which would be like the blockchain.
Way more efficient.
Yeah,
more
exactly.
Efficient. Way more efficient.
Yeah, yeah. And so that's how they were going to scale, is you're going to have like this ability to have private transactions.
Was this the first use, as far as you're aware, of the words L2?
That's a great question. I have no idea. I was talking to someone recently and they were like, what does L2 mean? Like, why is it called a layer 2? And I was like, that term layer 2 comes from old understandings of how computer networking works. They have these like kind of famous like layer diagrams where layer 1 is like the fact that your computers are physically connected to each other. Layer 2 is this protocol called like IP, which is like, where is everyone? Layer 3 was like TCP, like, so you layer things on and you can add protocols on top of other protocols.
So it's like normal computer science speak, basically.
Yeah. But the thing that I get in trouble for, not trouble, but I like argue with people, is everyone's always like, we figured out kind of what, last episode we talked about, what is that layer 2? Like, what does that actually mean for Bitcoin and for like money? It's like I always get in arguments with people like who are trying to be like, oh, well, this is layer 3 now. We've invented layer 3. And I'm like, there is no layer 3.
What does that mean? Michael Saylor loves this term layer 3, I think. Like if layer 2s are the protocol layer where the settlement happened. And then I think, what is the argument?
Applications would be layer 3 or something.
Right, like the business use cases.
Yeah, which like, okay, maybe that, I could maybe see that, but like the nerd, like the very like definitionally strict nerd in me is like, that's like really loose. That's like a loose definition.
And it's a marketing definition.
Yeah. Maybe it's good for marketing.
Yeah, we got to come up with like weird terms and fun terms to sell things.
Yeah, and people like layer 2, layer 3, there's progress. Progress is being made. We had layer 2, now we have layer 3. Like things are moving forward. Like the numbers are getting bigger. Yeah, so it's like,
makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit seductive
so
there.
We don't know. I mean, I remember not that long ago, the only time you heard the word layer 2 was either, well, I guess in the Ethereum ecosystem, but in Bitcoin, Lightning was understood to be really the only thing that constituted a layer 2. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, I think that's, Liquid sidechain launched around the same time or before Lightning did. So if you count sidechains as layer 2s, which I count it as a layer 2, but we talked last time, my definition of a layer 2 is quite permissive, depending, like, is Coinbase a layer 2? Well, maybe, so, Liquid's been around for a long time. I think Rootstock launched ahead of that. Some of the things I think that make it sort of like, when I think about layer 2s, I think about how are we transacting with Bitcoin, and like the use case that we're trying to accomplish is we're trying to like keep track of who owns what Bitcoin. So like I can send you Bitcoin, you can send me Bitcoin, and all we care about is who owns the Bitcoin. I feel like a lot of other layer 2 things, like Rootstock, I think was the very first merge mine, like sidechain, right? They came out like before Liquid did, is my understanding. But they built an EVM into it. And so it's like not just like who owns the Bitcoin, it's all about like smart contracts, like building other things, like, I don't know, AMMs, DEXs, that kind of lending stuff that you can do when you have contracts.
Whatever. Do DeFi with Bitcoin as your base currency.
Yeah, exactly. As the idea, right? But I'm really more focused on, okay, like I want to pay someone with Bitcoin. What am I using to pay them with the Bitcoin?
You're a payments maxi.
I'm a payments maxi, I guess. Yeah, there's what they call it, SOE is. But do you know what I'm talking about? Like the maybe it's SOV, the store of value.
Store of value
versus MOE. Money,
medium of exchange.
Media exchange, right? Yeah. Probably.
So you love medium of exchange. We all love store of value. I mean, store of value is number one, obviously, for everyone. But
layer 1, obviously.
But, right, of course. But you love Bitcoin. You have hopes for Bitcoin as a medium of exchange.
I use Bitcoin as a medium of exchange regularly, and I'm a huge fan of how convenient and easy and like amazing it is for doing commerce.
For payments like under $1,000 or
for all of things. I mean, so I run Bitcoin Plus Plus, which is an international conference series. We have I have vendors all over the world that I need to pay. I have like sponsors from all over the world that I need to get paid from. And the easiest way to get paid or to pay someone is to use Bitcoin. Sometimes it's on chain, sometimes it's Lightning. We did a conference in Buenos Aires last February. It's our first one in Latin America. And I usually have to have a local friend that'll help me like basically translate the Bitcoin to the local currency, because it's sort of rare to find a vendor that will accept Bitcoin directly. But my friend had this really cool service. I can't remember what it was called, maybe Krypton Markets or something, where he could produce a Lightning invoice that when I paid it would automatically pay the vendor. And this was just local Argentinian infrastructure. So he would generate the invoice, send me the invoice, and I would pay it, and it would directly get paid, basically.
But he would invoice you in Argentinian denominated dollars, but you could pay him that amount in Bitcoin at that moment.
Yeah, so he would, basically it would figure out what, I needed to pay. It was for t-shirts, for example. Like we were buying t-shirts for the conference. So he would basically get an invoice from them that was payable through this like service called Crypto Markets, I think is what the name is. And Crypto Markets would produce like a Lightning invoice for whatever that value is at the current exchange rate. And the invoice was only good for like 10 minutes or something. So we had a little bit of like, he's like, are you online now? Can you pay it? I'm like, wait, okay. And it was kind of big. It was like $1,000 invoice or whatever. So I was like trying to figure out what wallet I could use to like pay it. I think it worked the first time. Yeah. But yeah, it was cool. It was like I could pay a Lightning invoice that would directly pay the vendor.
So
I love medium exchange.
One of the many reasons you are a Lightning Maxi is because you're a payments Maxi. You want to be able to use payments really effectively, and that's something that Lightning does well. It doesn't do pretty much any of the other DeFi like use cases that people are using L2s for, but it does do payments pretty well. So
and it's built to be a payments network.
It's built to be a payments network. Why that's like probably a good segue to talk about how it's built. And why it's built to be a payments network. Like, how does Lightning work under the hood for dummies?
For dummies, this is a great question. Okay, I feel like the easiest way to explain it is like, I was talking about how we have a contract. Like I like to think of Lightning as like contract law. Maybe this isn't the easiest way, but maybe it'll be helpful for some people. The idea is like you and I both want to so we want to start being able to exchange Bitcoin quickly without having to tell the blockchain about every time that we've exchanged money, right?
Maybe we have a private payments network up here that settles eventually down on layer one.
Yeah, eventually maybe. So the idea is like I'll take some money and we'll open up a contract, and that contract will say that like you and I basically now have a shared bank account, and it's got, let's say, like 3 Bitcoin in it or whatever. I'll put 1 Bitcoin in, you'll put 2 Bitcoin in, and we open up a channel that's got like 3 Bitcoin in it.
And we both have keys to this channel that need to be signed in order for the Bitcoin in that channel to be settled on layer one.
Exactly. So that Bitcoin can't be spent unless you get a signature or sign off from both account holders, which is us, right? Shared account. So I can't produce a Bitcoin transaction without your signature, which means I have to send you the transaction that I want, my proposal of how that money should be spent. I can write out a Bitcoin transaction, be like, this is how I propose we spend the money. I send it to you. You get to like read it, look at it, verify that you agree with where it says the money should go before you sign it, right? Mm-hmm. And so because it requires both of our signatures, that means that that money can only move whenever you get agreement from both parties, right?
So last time you were on, I had one personal question about this. So you have like a situation basically where the way that this is mediated in a permissionless exit style way is that every time there's a change of state on Lightning, like change of account balance on Lightning,
exactly,
this sort of transaction signature situation is executed, but it's not executed back to settling on to layer one. So how does layer one Bitcoin know every time that?
It doesn't.
Oh, it doesn't. It doesn't.
No.
Okay.
So the idea then is we then have private contracts that basically are Bitcoin transactions. And like I'll say, okay, I own 1 Bitcoin on it. And let's say you own 2 Bitcoins, and we'll both sign it because we think that's correct. And then if you send me a Bitcoin or whatever, we then have a new version of the contract that I would sign where it's now I own 2 Bitcoin and you own 1. And we'd sign it.
But if I want to exit this contract, like I'm like, oh, you're going rogue.
You just take the most recent version and you put that on chain.
Oh, so you can put it on chain, basically. It's like it's an it's a transaction that you can like pull down, basically. Like it's both signed. They've both been signed, but they haven't been executed.
Exactly.
Okay.
And until you can keep it off chain and keep signing new versions of the contract, which update your balance of what your current update is, until one of you decides to take a transaction and put it on chain, and then it closes the shared account, basically.
Okay, cool. Okay, so 2 of 2 multi-sig. We can have our own private payments like situation if we want to settle, or if one of us decides that the other is going rogue,
or
we can just pull down to layer
from
1.
You in 2 months, and I'm tired of waiting for you to sign the next thing. I just take the current balance, and that's it.
I just bounce. So I had Giannis on earlier this week or last week, and he was saying one of his criticisms of Lightning, and we'll get into a little bit of the criticisms, a little bit of the trade-offs and the benefits in a second, but one of his criticisms of the system, he was like, oh, but you have to do a layer 1 transaction, and that's really clunky. But
you have to do that to set up the contract.
I see.
Like to set up the shared account, you have to make an output with the balance of that shared account.
Wouldn't you have to do that with any L2 though? Yes. Lightning maximalism. Here we go. Okay.
I think the thing with Lightning in its current form, the current iteration of Lightning as it lives and breathes and exists today, is that the maximum number of people you can have in a shared account is 2. And the reason for that is that it has to do with the penalty mechanism, right? So like, as we're like making little exchanges of Bitcoin between ourselves, we keep signing new versions of this contract, right? There's nothing that deletes the old versions of the contract. So there's nothing necessarily preventing, like all of those old contracts are still valid, right? They have both of our signatures on them. So either of us at any point could take that old contract and put it in the chain and say, this is the current state, right? So in the protocol, you need a way that basically you can cancel a prior version so that only the most recent one is the one that you would want to put into the chain, right?
So this is actually dovetailing into another criticism potentially, or challenge, I would say, with Lightning, which is you can only have 2 people managing one channel at any given time.
Currently,
so if you want to, route payments all over the place, you have to have channels connecting to channels, connecting to channels. And all of those nodes at each sort of middle point between the channels need to have enough Bitcoin. I think of like
pointing in the right direction.
It was explained to me like an abacus, right? Like, so, if, how do you think that's being addressed? Like, what did you think?
Well, it's expensive.
It's expensive to address.
Well, it's expensive in terms of like the flexibility of the money. It's like, I don't know, centralization is cheaper and more efficient than decentralized, right? And so Lightning is probably the most decentralized version of a payment network in terms of you can only have 2 people in pairwise channels, right? So you like need the graph to be connected kind of in one-on-one things.
Hyper decentralized, hyper peer-to-peer.
Right, exactly. It's extremely peer-to-peer, but it's more expensive in terms of the number of new contracts that need to be shipped on main chain, right? And you pay for each one of those because every 2 people that have a connection have to have a contract, right?
Are there like other hidden costs associated with how this actually works in practice, right? Because so many of these Lightning channels are sort of professional liquidity providers, right? And a lot of like normie retail users don't interact with any of this.
I mean, I think part of it is like, okay, opening a Lightning channel makes a lot of sense if you're going to send and receive a lot of payments over that same channel. So maybe it's with a partner that you do a lot of exchange with. Maybe it's 2 big exchanges that have a lot of people on it that are sending money back and forth, right? Like Lightning channels only really get you good value in terms of paying to get that like opening contract. If that's going to be a contract, you're going to like actually use liquidity of over a period of time, right? So it only really saves you money on chain if you're like doing a decent amount of back and forth on the same channel. Whereas if you really were only going to like pay that person once, you might as well just do a one on-chain payment, right? Because you have to like set up the channel with an on-chain and then close it later with another on-chain. Anyways.
Well, and that's also like something that comes up, right? Is the need to constantly be balancing channels and managing channels, and those are layer 1 transactions, and that is expensive potentially.
It's expensive and it takes work. It takes work, right? It's a thing you have to manage. I think the reality of like the way that works though is that for me, the way I see it, I really think of Lightning as being more like the merchant level. Like if you're a merchant, maybe you're getting hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of transactions or commerce in and out of your like wallet a day, right? You have to pay people out, you're getting money in, but your like volume of money that you're like a pipe for is bigger than like maybe a Venmo use case, which is like $5 to $10 every week, you know? So there's like there's almost like scales here. And I think that like one of the frustrations, I think a lot of the reason you see a lot of FUD about Lightning is that a lot of people, a lot of more prominent projects spent a lot of time, energy, and effort trying to make Venmo work on Lightning. And I mean, look, like the Phoenix wallet is, my understanding is that they're cash flow positive. They're like, you know, they have a sustainable business. They run that kind of protocol. Like they're making Lightning work for the Venmo use case, if that makes sense. Like people pay them for liquidity. They like, you know, they've managed to make that work for them as a business. So it's not impossible.
But challenging.
And I think to some extent they do try and, you know, they try and convince people to open channels or prepay for channels when on-chain fees are lower, like that kind of thing. So you do have a lot more like management of how expensive is it to open a channel, like your timing around that, et cetera.
Phoenix Wallet is an interesting example because I believe they are self-custodial, right? Like that's their
you run a Lightning
value
node on your phone.
You run your own Lightning node as opposed to the way most Lightning wallets are built right now, which is that other people are doing all this work for a retailer on their behalf and effectively custodying their Bitcoin for them.
That's right, yeah. And then there's some interesting more like hybrid models, which we can talk about maybe later, or maybe now is a great time to go into it, where they use something that's like still more custodial. So like something like Liquid, for example, but there's a federation of people that are holding it. So it's got like a distributed multi-sig that's holding the Bitcoin. You keep account of it using a different layer 2 object. Like on Liquid, it's a blockchain. You just have normal transactions, right?
That's something that's also an important distinction is when you're using Lightning in a custodial way, it's literally just the wallet company holding your Bitcoin on a single sig for all we know.
Like on a Lightning node somewhere, probably.
On a Lightning node,
like
right. Exactly. Okay, and there's no, and a Lightning node is a different wallet address type than layer 1?
Yeah, so I mean, Lightning nodes will have an on-chain balance usually, which you can send and receive using just like normal Bitcoin addresses. If you want to get paid over the Lightning network, you need a Lightning invoice. So the most recent revision, we just had a big revision of Lightning invoices that got added to the spec. Colloquially, they're called Boltz 12 invoices. But that's basically like you get a Lightning invoice and you pay the Lightning invoice. Lightning invoices were designed to be an improvement on Bitcoin addresses. One of the problems, it depends on who you ask, but one of the problems from a technical side of using a Bitcoin address is that I can give you a Bitcoin address and you could pay it at any point in the future. If that makes sense.
Oh, nice.
Well, sounds nice, but from like a certain perspective, that means my wallet has to keep track of every address I've ever given out over however long that wallet.
Oh, so address management, very difficult.
Yeah, and so if you pay me 10 years from now to that address, like I have to still be keeping track of that. And if there's millions of addresses that I give out over a year to clients or whatever, that's like the burden, that becomes a very long tail burden of like not losing those addresses and just kind of like constantly scanning for new money coming in.
Is there such a thing as a multi-sig address? Is that even a possible thing on Lightning?
So no, so for Lightning, you get an invoice. An invoice will be like, pay my node this amount of Bitcoin. Maybe this is some suggestions of how you can find me on the network to pay me. And you have until, they have an expiration, which is like an important point. So you can pay me up until this time, right?
But if you were a Lightning wallet provider and you had, you know, clients who are trusting you custodially with their Bitcoin, there's no way really to distribute that key or decentralize that key. It's just that Bitcoin's just hanging out on that one Lightning node and we hope nothing goes wrong.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So these are some trade-offs. We'll cover the benefits. We'll get into it. We're gonna make the case for Lightning maximalism, but this is important background information. Okay. You mentioned like Lightning's kind of getting some FUD right now. Why do you think that is?
I have spicy takes on this.
Okay, let's go.
Yeah, my belief about why Lightning is getting FUD is that it has competitors for the first time.
Yes.
So there's people that are like Lightning's great, but there's these problems with how expensive, the pairwise stuff, which admittedly expensive. Like, what if we could get more than one person in a channel, right? It's kind of the idea. So instead of having two people in that on-chain thing, what if we could have like thousands of people? And that way, those thousands of people could all trade with each other very cheaply and easily. They just have to do this off-chain contract stuff, whatever. And we only need one UTXO for like a big group of people is the idea, right? In the happy case. And so there's things like ARC came out. ARC was one of the, like, Barack, when he came out with it, like, he had this chart that's like, here's all the things that Lightning doesn't do as well as ARC, right? And so it was like a big, like, we're improving on ARC. You have to FUD on Lightning in order to show how your new protocol is an improvement, right? And I feel like he was kind of the first of the genre. And that was like his like opening shot was like,
every competitor is basically feels like Lightning is the king to overtake.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so they're incentivized to FUD Lightning.
Yeah, I mean, I think like you talked about Yanis, who does the Bitcoin layer 2 research reports and stuff. I think if you look at his reports, like Lightning is the only one that gets like green checks across the board. It's been a while since I've looked. Maybe it's changed. But like,
that's right.
It's like the golden standard of what to beat in terms of being both decentralized
on the security side. You're right,
as well as being able to exit easily.
That makes sense.
Get your money back without asking permission.
I also have a theory that, not only does it have competitors for the first time, but so many of the competitors are people who, sort of come out of this sort of Bitcoin season 2 post-ordinals landia who, kind of like to make a point of kind of poo-pooing on Bitcoin, traditional toxic Bitcoin maximalists, right? Which I think Lightning is very much associated with.
For better,
so
for worse.
That's my spicy take.
So I've met Maxis who are like super not into like, it's like,
because of the custodial stuff. Why do Maxi? Who in the Maxi land doesn't like Lightning?
I think it depends. I think like, it's people that are more store of value than a medium of exchangers, and there's a good number of those. Yeah,
that's a type.
Yeah, that's a type, and so they don't understand why. Like, why do we need this Lightning?
Like, why would I spend my Bitcoin?
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Makes sense. Okay, so let's talk a little bit. Now we'll get into sort of like, kind of like. Well, actually, before we get into despite it all, why I'm still a Lightning Maxi. Let's talk about what are the green checks across the board for Lightning? Why is Lightning so great? Yeah. Oh, and it doesn't have to be those exact green check marks that Yanis used, but like, what do you think are the benefits of Lightning? Like, why is Lightning still so special and the king to be overtaken in the first place? Like, what is great about Lightning?
I think it solved the like trustless unilateral exit problem.
Right.
Which for people, what does that mean? It means that you, on your own, independently, at any point, can decide to take your money out of Lightning and return it back to layer 1 and have it as which is normal Bitcoin. Like, you don't have to ask permission. You can take action on your own to get your Bitcoin back. You don't have to ask anyone. You don't have to get anyone else's signatures. You like at a point at any time where you can just leave. And that's what they call unilateral, which means single side exit, get your money back onto layer 1.
So it is I believe it's the only layer 2 right now that's actually live and functional, where you can basically put your Bitcoin onto this second layer, this accounting ledger in the sky, do fast payments, do private payments, do whatever you want to do with it.
Yeah.
And then get your money out of there back onto layer 1 without having to get the permission of anyone else.
Exactly.
I mean, pretty good feature.
Yeah. Yeah. And it turns out that's like pretty hard to beat when you start trying to get more people squashed into a UTXO.
On the security side, but it is a very specific security-based feature. Perhaps some people would make the argument, okay, but I'm willing to,
trust a committee of people.
I'm willing to nudge a little bit. I'm willing to bend down a little bit on the security in order to get more use cases or more convenience or more whatever the other things are that I care about from a commercial point of view.
Right. But then it's like, but the other things you care about usually aren't payments, right? Maybe they are.
Right. Right. Maybe. Yeah, maybe. Depends. But even on the payment side, like if there was a payments kind of technology that didn't have some of these like liquidity challenges.
So a good example would be like the federated Xiaomi mints, like Fedi is like the big project that has been working on that. There's also the Cashu project that does have different trade-offs. The Cashu project, you're giving your money to a single person and they're giving you little cash notes, right, that you then can exchange. the federated model is there's like a collective of people that are guarding your Bitcoin. And you get a little ECash note that then sits in your wallet. Those are super cheap to hold. It gets that concentration of capital. So like there's not as many on-chain transactions, if that makes sense. Like you have to make an on-chain transaction to check your money into the bank. But you don't have to like have any more on-chain transactions to transact with anyone else already at the bank. That makes sense.
So this is, I told you offline, I wanted to ask you about Fedi specifically, because I was going to ask if there's anything other than Lightning that does strike your fancy, what might it be? And it seems like Fedi / ECash models are also interesting to you, or you see some value in those models.
Yeah, I think like, I like Fedi, I like the ECash stuff because I think it is, like Lightning, I would say has this last mile problem. Like, that kind of comes from the networking world where it's really easy to connect people that have a lot of traffic and are densely connected, etc. But whenever you start getting to like the Venmo use case where like I want to have a balance in Bitcoin and I want to spend 20, 30 bucks a week, I want to be able to receive like $500 randomly from a friend, I want to be able to send like $40 tomorrow, that kind of thing, and cash it out whenever I want. That kind of use case is really hard to do in Lightning. Because being able to get $500 randomly, like you have to have enough inbound liquidity, like you might have to make an on-chain payment, etc. Like that can get really hard with the way that Lightning is configured. The nice thing about these big mints is that you get a lot more access to liquidity at a lot cheaper price, if that makes sense. But it also has a really nice property based on the way that they're doing these eCash tokens that you get a lot of privacy as well. So you're giving up that unilateral exit ability. You're giving up the ability to say, take your money out back to layer one without asking the mint to pay you out. You have to ask the mint to help you make a payment every time you want to make a payment is a trade-off. The federation model tries to get around this by providing like a series of like redundant people that you can all, you have to ask them. Like there's more than one person to ask, if that makes sense.
Kind of like the L2 federated multisig.
Exactly.
It's almost like a similar way of approaching the problem of how do you distribute your trust assumptions a little bit.
It's exactly the same.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same. Yeah. And the nice thing about eCash is that it's cheap. Downside is if like your phone gets lost, you'll lose all your balance because no one knows what your balance is other than your phone. Like it's not like on a blockchain, if you like remember your seed phrase, but you lose all your current wallet data, you can take your seed phrase, put it in a new wallet, and it can rescan the blockchain and find where all of your money is, right? You just need to keep your seed phrase because the blockchain contains all the data. And we're relying on the network to remember all that blockchain data, right? Like everyone's got a copy of the Bitcoin blockchain, which means they have a copy of what your wallet balance is. So you have this redundancy and backup on chain. So you can always find where your balance is as long as you have your seed.
So it sounds like maybe the universe that you foresee us moving towards, or a universe that could work, is one where you kind of have Lightning rails as sort of like the main basic infrastructure for payments or medium of exchange. But then you also maybe have these sort of federation style architectures on top.
Yeah, so one of the maybe that is the layer 3.
Maybe that's the layer 3.
No, I can't admit that. That's like I'm gonna like ruin my personal brand here about being a layer 2 maxi. But the really cool thing that Fedi really pioneered, I think they were one of the first ones to do this, where you'll have this like federation where you could have millions of people that have eCash balances, and they could be tiny. You could have like tiny little balance in your wallet, and it wouldn't impact the mint at all. Like it's completely functional. Or you could have a pretty decent sized balance. I don't know if you want to do that, but then you're kind of stuck in this mint, right? Like you can interact with anyone that has and understands that particular mint dollars. So how is this going to like work globally? Well, Fedi realized that they could use the existence of the Lightning network and how well accepted, like everyone who accepts and can pay a Lightning invoice or can receive a Lightning. Basically, they make it such that there's these like little gateways where I can send the gateway a Lightning invoice to pay and my eCash balance. They'll take my eCash and pay the Lightning invoice on my behalf, basically. So you basically got these like translators that will connect your eCash balance seamlessly to like the outside Lightning world. So you can have a wallet where your balance, you don't know, you don't even have to know how your wallet works, right? all you know is that you have a balance and denominated in Bitcoin, and you can send and receive Bitcoin over Lightning just the same as whatever. You don't have to worry about your channel liquidity. You don't have to worry about like the mint liquidity. You don't have to worry about paying you have to pay a little bit for those Lightning things. Like there's still a payment to like send the payment, etc. But someone else, like that Lightning gateway, then is servicing a large amount of traffic, right? So they're really getting that economy of scale. Like they'll have the Lightning channel or channels, but they've got, in theory, like thousands to hundreds to millions of payments that they're now using for that whole, maybe there's 1 million people in the mint with a balance, and they're all using that same Lightning infrastructure then. So then that's how you get real nice scaling properties, I think.
So you have sort of Lightning underneath, and then you have these sort of federated models on top. Maybe we could, in a moment, we'll go into a little bit deeper into Fediman's architecture and sort of ECash architectures. But
Sure.
But I think that this is, I think like right immediately, my first question is, doesn't having a Fediman or a federation style model on top of Lightning, doesn't that sort of ruin Lightning's core value prop of unilateral exit, right? Like now you have all these people who no longer have unilateral exit, which was perhaps the whole point in the first place.
Well, yeah. Yes.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
Like, yes. I mean, I think the thing is, like, for me, it's like, okay, at what level of capital? It turns out that sovereignty is expensive. Would be my like unfortunate.
Decentralization is expensive.
Decentralization and self-sovereignty is expensive.
Decentralization is inefficient, is another way of saying that, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us in our modern days today of like using and spending money, we're all benefiting from pretty centralized systems that like, so.
Services are cheap because they're all controlled by like 10 companies.
Right.
Yeah.
And, Venmo's a cheap way to do it because they just have a database record with your stuff, right? Like, anyways, the database goes down. Who do we know who owns what money?
Big problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you pay for freedom.
Right.
Freedom is what you can defend.
Right. And you also pay for privacy to some extent, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things, so like when I think about Lightning nodes, I think Phoenix has done an amazing job of building a wallet where like doing the Venmo use case seems to work out generally, if that makes sense. Like they've managed to make lower amounts work. But in general, if you're like going to run your own node, like you're really kind of looking in like maybe you're doing like hundreds to thousands of dollars of transactions. And then it makes sense and is economical, if that makes sense. To like actually have a node and run it and keep it going. Whereas like if you're on the smaller end of like tiny payments, it's probably not going to be economical for you to have a Lightning channel, at least not with the current way that it's set up. Maybe at some point we'll be able to get Lightning nodes or Lightning channels with multi-parties, et cetera, and things will start looking a little different. But I think what that starts looking like is a lot what like ARC looks like, which is a more kind of, they're trying to do unilateral exit. I haven't looked at how their contracts work in a while, so I'm not really sure exactly what the trade-off is there. I think it gets quite expensive to do the unilateral exit. Is a problem. So it's cheap to use it, and it's cheap to be have like money in the system. But if you ever want to leave, it becomes you can't get your money out, but it's expensive to get your money out.
Would this problem be solved by just having layer 1 with federated mints on top and just skipping the Lightning component altogether? Or does the Lightning component, even in that universe, substantially help?
I think the thing that Lightning adds that you don't really get as much on-chain is that, well, there's a couple of things. One is it's really fast. Lightning network, called Lightning for a reason. It's a really, really fast way to get finality on moving Bitcoin. If you're transacting on-chain, generally speaking, you're going to have to wait 5 to 10 minutes, right?
Which even these sort of like institutional bottom layers, they don't want to wait 10 minutes.
No one wants to wait 10 minutes.
No one wants to wait 10
minutes.
And
if you're trying to use Bitcoin to buy a coffee, like, I forget what MOE stands for, but medium of exchange.
Right.
If you can't wait 10 minutes for
But the coffee buyers would be using ECash in this universe, right? But the people who would be theoretically using Lightning are like businesses, like who are providing underlying infra.
I think the ideal setup, right, would be that coffee vendor has a Lightning node and is running their Lightning channels, and they're going to give that ECash person a Lightning invoice, and the ECash person is going to pay them over Lightning. They're going to but using a swap service where they give their ECash and that Lightning invoice to a swap service, and that swap service is going to pay on Lightning.
Okay, so that's new information to me. So let's talk a little bit about the ECash architecture, or, I mean, should we maybe it might be easier to just do Fediman, as an example
Sure.
of like how Fediment actually works and how
Okay.
you know, like let's break Fediment for
Like,
dummies, you guys. I haven't covered Fedi yet, and I'm very excited to do
You
this.
should probably also get someone from Fedi to come
We will.
fill
We
in
will.
the
Obi, if you're listening, I would love to have you on the pod. Okay.
fill in exactly how that one works. But yeah, so the general idea though is that you as for your wallet as an eCash holder, it looks like a Lightning wallet because you get paid. You can generate a Lightning invoice that you give to someone else. Maybe they're on Lightning. Maybe they're on Arc. Maybe they're on something else.
So is it like interoperating with Lightning?
Yeah.
Oh.
And Lightning is becoming this like connective big channel, like the connective tissue sort of between all of these. Like, so if you're on Arc and you have an Arc wallet, or if you have like a Liquid wallet, so if you're on what's the Aqua wallet, for example,
right,
you can send and receive Lightning, but your balance is held in Liquid. But they don't tell you that. Maybe they do tell you that, but they could not tell you that. If that makes sense.
They could abstract it. So Lightning could be a completely abstracted layer that's critical, like blood vessels, but we don't even see it or notice it.
The only thing that you would see is that Lightning invoice. So the Lightning invoice just becomes the thing that everyone uses to pay and get paid.
Okay, so let's go back to the Fedi example. Okay, so I am part of a federated mint with Fedi. I have the Fedi wallet. I have Bitcoin in my Fedi wallet. Is that Bitcoin? That Bitcoin's being held in a like distributed
multi-sig.
Federation, right? In a multi-sig. But
the
then
people that hold the keys to the multi-sig are considered guardians of the Fediment.
Right. Similarly members. To like the L2 federated multi-sigs, but a little bit more control, it sounds like, over like how the community is set up. You kind of get to choose instead of a company deciding who these federated guardians are.
It's
communities
open.
can create their own federations,
so
which is really the value prop that I understand.
Yeah, so you could create the like
you and I Rails. And like 15 friends. It's the Bitcoin Rails Federation.
Yeah, exactly. And so you have a community bank with your friends, and those guardians are the ones that have one of the keys to the federation, so to speak.
Right.
And then anyone can check money in
for friends and family.
Yeah, anyone can check money in and get a balance on your mint. And then they can use Lightning. The nice thing
But you said this is a multi-sig protected thing, which means they're using layer 1?
Yes. So all of the Bitcoin is held on layer 1, right?
Okay.
But you put it into different contracts. So in Lightning, you put it into 2 of 2 contracts.
Okay.
On multi-sig, so federations, you put it into like, 7 of 15 contracts or whatever. And those people hold the keys. And so if you want to move money on chain, you have to get a certain number of those people to sign off on it.
Okay, so where does Lightning come into the picture of this architecture? Because this architecture is kind of like the basic Fedi architecture.
Yeah. So the awesome thing about the Lightning is you no longer really need permission to exit on chain. You can take your ECash and you give it to this like Lightning liquidity guy.
Well, you can do Lightning, Fedi, ECash swaps.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what you were talking about before.
Yes.
Okay, I'm putting it all together.
Great.
It's starting to make sense. Okay, so you have this federated. You have this federation, this community bank that's basically secured by a multi-sig on layer 1.
Exactly.
That bank gives me little ECash notes, which, I mean, maybe that's a good thing to kind of explain. Like, what are these little ECash? Are they tokens? What are they?
I mean, it's just a little...
Or is it just like a balance? Is it just...
They're just like, it's like someone handing you a cash $5 bill. And
but like
$5
on my phone?
written on it. Yeah, and your phone holds on to it.
Are they like literally bills? Like, are they like indivisible like UTXO? Are they?
Yeah, they have numbers on them.
Really?
Yeah,
okay,
I don't know.
So they're like paper bill. They're kind of like UTXOs.
They have denominations.
Okay.
Well, UTXOs can have like any. They're like you pick the number, but they are denominated.
Oh, they only have certain denominations, like 1, 5, 10, 20. But then, so how do you make change?
Well, you have to like go to the mint, and it'll re-break it up into like the right numbers.
But that sounds like cumbersome if I want to pay for something right away.
I'm not your wallet handled, and hopefully all this is magicked under the hood.
Handled on the wallet.
Yeah.
Okay, so I get these. I have my wallet and it has my little ECash notes. I hope they have like pictures of Satoshi and Hal Finney on them.
That would be cute. Yeah,
that would be so cute.
Really cute.
Good marketing, you guys. And then theoretically, I can swap those notes. So even I don't need.
You can take your notes and your Lightning invoice, and you go take it to a service provider. And ECash Mint could have various Lightning guys doing this.
So it's like a Lightning ECash exchange.
Yeah, exactly. and you give them.
Are there
ECash.
Lightning ECash exchange providers now?
I think so.
Live?
Yeah.
Is this actionable?
So if you were to pull out your wallet, with
maybe
Fedi,
I should start an ECash Lightning exchange. I wonder how much those guys are making.
Who
What do you
knows?
think are the fees on those?
I think it's whatever they charge, right? How much competition you have. Like,
And I guess that's variable. I guess it depends
yeah,
on
and
the
if you're
market.
charging a lot on a really, you really want to be on a mint then that's got a lot of exchange happening, right? So you want to mint with a lot of people on it.
Could
you wanna be
ECash notes
servicing.
be listed on like Coinbase? Like,
And I don't know why they would be, but sure.
but they could be. I guess it would be up to Coinbase. The Coinbase would have to build the infrastructure to just decide that they wanted to hold ECash.
Yeah.
One day we could have ECash, Fedi, Solana exchanges, you guys.
You could.
Who knows?
But this is where I think Lightning,
Over Obi's dead body. But okay, yeah.
Lightning as a protocol really shines here because it's really built as a swap protocol. So it makes doing swaps really easy. So like I've been talking to, I have a friend over at Rainbow Wallet, which is a pretty famous like ETH side wallet.
Yeah.
And I've been like trying to talk him into building a gateway between ETH and Lightning. So imagine you could just pay Lightning invoices from your Rainbow Wallet using like any coin of choice, but you just need a swap provider.
Well, so this brings up a very critical question. So, the Ethereum ecosystem people have kind of sort of figured out trustless swaps a little bit, depending on what's going on, right?
Yeah.
Is this a trust? How do the swaps work?
It's trustless.
How?
Great question. This is like where I'm like, right. So Lightning as a protocol, I call it a payment for secret protocol.
Okay.
You give me a secret, I give you money.
Oh, wait.
Pay you for a secret.
So basically you're paying, I'm buying your secret. I'm paying your private key. I'm paying for your private key.
Well, it's a per payment private secret. So every payment has a different secret that you learn.
The secret, I get the secret first.
You get the secret only after I get paid. So when I get your money, I'll tell you what the secret is.
What if I get your money and I'm like, no, you can't have the secret?
Well, I won't give you the secret until I have your money.
No, but I'm saying, what if I get your money and then refuse to give you your secret?
You can't do that because of the way that the protocol is set up. Literally,
it's like an automatic.
Way I get the money is
it's like a PSBT.
It's a swap. It's a trustless swap. Like I don't have to like. The only way that the exchange happens is if both things get exchanged. There's no possibility for one side to give one and not the other.
Is it fair to say it's like a PSBT in the sense that
no, very different.
They're very different. So then, but what? That's not happening on layer 1 then.
No, this is
okay. This is a protocol.
Lightning is a payment for secrets protocol.
Okay.
And it's really.
But so Fedi was built to be able to do Lightning swaps. Essentially, it was architected for the purpose of being able to swap with Lightning. They thought about this in advance.
I think it's something they were able to design after the fact. It just so happened to figure out how to do it. But basically,
and Lightning didn't have to be affected or changed for this. Exactly. They were able to figure it out, which is really a key unlock for Fedi. Good job.
Yeah, really cool.
Yeah.
And like, so there's a Boltz service that does swaps between like rootstock and Lightning, but it's cool because like you can really take, and this is why Lightning is so key to, I think, really making Bitcoin continue to be like a, what do you call it? MOE? I forget what the first
medium of exchange.
Medium of exchange, and like having this amazing big interoperable payment network possible because everyone can you can have like ARCs and you can have eCash mints and they can pay each other without knowing that they're on different, like that there's underlying different systems there because they're swapping it through Lightning, if that makes sense.
So funny because it's almost like, the Bitcoin Maxis have their own like weird currency exchanges going on too.
Yeah, it's like a bank network.
Yeah,
basically.
Yeah.
And like you can route it through this like open decentralized network to get money from.
They've got trustless swaps already, you guys.
Yeah.
They already have trustless swaps. What are you talking about?
Yeah, it's been happening. Yeah.
Trustless swaps, the permissionless exit. They're way out of the curve. All right, cool.
Yeah.
I should say we. But
but Lightning's really cool. And I think this is like, if you look over at the Ethereum ecosystem, they're missing a Lightning, if that makes sense. Like they're missing that payment network of being able to swap between all the L2s.
But that's because their payments are already pretty fast, right? Aren't they?
Maybe, but they have Base now, they have Arbitrum, they have like all these different layer 2s now, and they don't really interoperate, right? Maybe there's like it's like
EVM on the EVM level.
But you have to go to the EVM and then swap over, right? Like there's no swap service maybe there are swap services that let you swap between
everything is built on the EVM. It's like, I feel like when I talk to folks outside of Bitcoin, like most people who work outside of Bitcoin, I say this to journalists all the time, like they don't even know how a blockchain works because they're just like thinking
And
about EVM. Like building on Ethereum means building with EVM.
Right.
Whereas like building on Bitcoin means like you're probably actually interacting with the UTXO set.
Yeah.
You know?
Definitely. 100%.
I think that's the biggest fundamental difference in many ways between what building on Bitcoin means versus building on any of these other chains.
True. And it's a lot more to learn, I think.
Oh, yeah.
There's nothing else in the world that works like UTXO.
Because VMs, in theory, I imagine, and my background was not in computer science. I'm learning all of this on the fly after getting into Bitcoin as like a, econ person. But yeah, my understanding is that like, EVM solidity is like somewhat familiar, like the concept of a VM is like familiar to computer science people.
It's like it's right there.
It like makes sense. Whereas like Bitcoin base layer blockchain, like that's truly new technology.
New tech, yeah. It's a completely new way of thinking about how things work.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. This is like super fun conversation. Okay. So now I think is a good time to say, okay, so your fundamental core take on why you are defending Lightning maximalism, which I actually think we've done pretty well in this episode, by the way. But you would say core is like, you're a payments maxi. If you're not a payments maxi, then
I don't think you care about Lightning.
Yeah, who cares about Lightning?
You don't care about Lightning.
Yeah,
and that's fine, but I care about getting paid and like in a private, secure way.
Right. Where
I get instant settlement and I don't have to ask permission to get paid.
And as long as you are a payments, this is like I think the key thing. As long as you are a payments maxi and if what you care about is payments, Lightning / maybe Lightning with Fedi together or something similar pretty much cover all of the bases of what the L2 community is trying to accomplish as far as security is concerned.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. It makes sense.
The only thing that I feel like these like new entrants like Arc and like ECash, like Fedi to some extent is they're trying to control your costs and control the amount of work to make sure that you can make payments.
Like, and they're trying to introduce use cases other than just payments, right? Like I think to me, like I think that's what, right?
Like I guess
they care about like lending and all these other things.
It's not a 3-letter acronym. It doesn't count. You need store of value and medium of exchange. Like what's the
It
doesn't fit the mold. Like it's not. I don't know.
Right. So, but I think that's as far as I'm concerned, I'm like okay, the only like real legit from this conversation, I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm going to. I feel like the real like reason to be like building with all of these like other technologies that are coming in, like the ZKP, BitVM, the AppCap bridges, blah blah blah. It's like because you want to do lending and all these other use cases. If payments is your jam, we've got it covered on the other side, you guys.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think they say you got it covered, but I think like Arc is like a cool. Like, there are cool new like medium of exchange protocols that are popping up like Arc. I think like, the Cashu ecosystem's exploding. Fediment, I feel like could definitely use more devs and more applications and integrations. And
is Cashu similar to Fedi? Is it
the biggest difference is that in Cashu, you're giving your Bitcoin to a single person. It's not federated.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That seems, what's the benefit of that? Why?
There isn't.
Okay. So why wouldn't you just use Fedi?
It's fast, easy, and cheap to set up and start running as like a indie dev that's just playing around with like ECash.
Okay, so if you just like want to have ECash for yourself, basically, if you want to be your own bank but have fast payments, that's the point of Cashu.
Kind of, but then it's like you probably don't. You're gonna have to run the Lightning. Like Cashus work with Lightning mints too. Like I was working with a basic.
It doesn't help retail that doesn't want to be technical. Like it doesn't help. Like it's like only for nerds. Yeah.
I mean, there's maybe like I want to run like so. Maybe there's some fun thing I could do with Base 58, where Base 58 runs a eCash mint, like a Cashu mint, and like if you buy credits to use at Base 58 online, like education stuff. You would have a balance. Then I don't have to keep track of users. You just have a balance or don't have one.
You could also, if you wanted to do a style like that on Fedi, you could. You just have to manage multiple keys. Like you could.
Well, I'd have to like set up a federation, which is a little more work, maybe.
Oh, I see. It's a little bit more like operational setup involved, but like not that much.
I don't know. Maybe we should try it. Like, then I could write. Maybe I should like try it and do like a blog post of like,
It's funny because Fedi they're not really doing marketing in the US right now is sort of the vibe that I'm getting.
That makes sense, yeah.
They're focused, I think, on like really the global south, right? And sort of like areas where like cheap Bitcoin payments. Do you have any alpha on that and how that's going for them? Or
I mean, no, not really, yeah.
Okay, I'd be curious. I do need to have somebody from Fedi on the show to kind of talk about maybe some of the commercial things that they're
be great to hear what they're up to, I think. Yeah.
Exactly.
But now I'm like, oh, maybe I do want to try setting up
a federation.
That sounds like fun.
I mean, I feel like I should try it. I feel like I'm gonna. I feel like,
yeah.
and At least, like literally
See
just
how it
even
goes.
using their interface. I think at one point I did download their wallet when it was in beta.
Yeah, I have their wallet. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. You can set up a federation from their wallet. I mean, this is all
I don't
something
know that you
normies can do.
I don't know if setting up a federation is a normie style thing. I think it's a little more involved.
Okay.
These are all great questions to ask.
Great questions to ask.
From the
Obi when he comes
project.
on the show.
Yeah. There you go.
Wink. Okay. So, cool. Well, I think that was so great. It's a perfect segue, actually, because you did cover Fedi and ECash at BTC++.
Berlin.
Your amazing conference.
Yeah.
In October. Many people don't know this about you, but so we talked about your fancy job at Blockstream, building Lightning with your bare hands. That's how I describe you to people.
Part of it. Yeah.
And then you left this fancy job to start an education company.
Yeah, well, I left it in theory to write a textbook. Textbook is not written yet. It's been 2 years. Oops. But instead, I've been working on doing education. So I started a nonprofit called Base 58, which I like to say is an engineering school built on the Bitcoin standard. And so we've got some online classes for that. I'm working this.
Are most of the engineers who work with you or take your classes, are they new to Bitcoin? Are they advancing in Bitcoin? What's the target?
It's a mix, yo. I've had non-developers that want to learn more about Bitcoin that then become really good developers. So that's like their entry into it. I've had Bitcoiners that just want to know more about how it works. I've had devs that want to get more into doing things in Bitcoin. Like they're Bitcoiners, they want to be know how Bitcoin works. So I really feel like it kind of just runs the gamut.
And you tend to do thematic classes, courses, conferences. So if there's somebody who wants to work, let's say you are a Bitcoin developer, but you really want to learn about eCash mints, then you might go to the eCash mints conference.
Yeah, so I run conferences also, right? So I've got the school, and then there's Bitcoin++, which is
the school. The school is
business.
online courses
right now. Yeah, I did some in-person classes last year, maybe even a year ago. I've kind of been focused more on doing conferences, but I'm hoping this year to really do more building out the online education experience with more classes, more content that you can just read through, like that kind of thing. Maybe actually get my textbook done, and so build that out as more online school.
Base 58 is sort of core classes school, mostly online education right now, and then there's conferences. In-person conferences all over the world.
All over the world.
Bitcoin++.
Bitcoin++.
Which you covered, Fedi. You've covered a bunch of different... What have you covered in the past? And we'll talk about what you're about
to do. We just finished our 7th conference in 3 years in Berlin in October. Our 8th one's going to be in Brazil next month.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it's coming up. I think we're like 5 weeks away now, which is terrifying because there's so much stuff I still have to do. But it's fine. We have time.
What are some of the past themes other than eCash? So I assume one of your earliest ones was a bunch were Lightning focused. No. Oh, wow. Sacrilege. Okay.
Last year we did 3 events. We did one on payments. This was our first mostly Lightning one.
Okay.
Medium exchange stuff. Payments in Argentina, which is a great place to be talking about payments. We did a script-focused one in Austin, which is an amazing conference where we got a lot of people working on covenants and other proposals to get together.
Was that the one where you had Reindell come and talk about OpCat?
Yes.
You guys.
Yeah,
okay.
It was great. It was really good. And then in October, we did our first ever eCash conference, and we got Callie over from the Cashu project. We got a bunch of Fedi people out to talk about Fedi, and had the first big eCash event that I know of, so first eCash conference. In the past, we've also done Layer 2s, which was the first one that I think Alpine Labs had their first talk at.
Really?
Back in, not last year, the year before, so 2022 in Austin was a Layer 2 conference. We had Paul Stortz out talking about drive chains.
I'm a fan of Paul.
John Light, who now works at Alpine Labs, had just come out with a research report with HRF about all Validium rollups and stuff. So he did a talk. So it was the first Layer 2 conference 2 years ago. We were way ahead of the curve.
Wow, those are some sexy people. Those people have done very well. They're shining right now.
I like to say Bitcoin++ is the venue where you find out what's going to be coming out of the pipe in the next 2 years.
Right. It's if you know, in a year you're going to be talking about everyone who is at Bitcoin++.
Basically,
sort of in the tech. If you're a tech nerd, if you're a nerd,
at least that's where it's kind of I call Bitcoin++ the frontier of Bitcoin. So it's a good place to.
Casey actually, fun fact. Casey presented about ordinals well before ordinals was a thing, before it hit mainnet, when he was just tinkering with the idea, basically.
First ever workshop was the very first Bitcoin++ in Austin in 2022.
Yeah, that's a very fun fact.
2021. 2022.
Very fun fact. We're going to have to clip that. Cool. Okay. Amazing. And so what are the upcoming conferences that you've got going on?
This year we're expanding quite aggressively. I don't know if this is a good idea. We'll find out. We're going to be in Brazil next month. We're going to be back in Austin in May. We're going to be talking about mempools and mining pools in May.
Ooh,
should be good.
In Austin?
In Austin.
Oh, I'm in.
Yeah.
I love the miners. I love it.
Yeah, it's going to be hopefully shining a light on mining tech. So working on getting.
Are you going to talk about MEV?
Yes, I hope to.
Okay,
that's the plan. So we're trying to get Matt Corralla to
decentralized pools.
Decentralized pools. Rachel Barchek's going to be there talking about Stratum stuff or whatever she's working on now.
We're highlighting all the. This is the panel I'm organizing for ETH Denver. We're going to do all the. We love this mining tech, mining hot tech.
Yeah, and we're really about transaction relay, right? So Gloria's going to be there. I'm hoping to get Peter Willett. He hasn't committed yet, but I've invited him to come talk about cluster mempools, which is a big redesign of how transactions get relayed. So it's going to be shining a light on all the new stuff that'll be coming out about mempools in the next few years.
Mempool nerds, if you're a mining nerd, this sounds like a good one.
It's going to be a great one.
Austin. This is Austin in May.
7th to 9th.
That sounds like one I want to be at.
Yeah, it's going to be great. And then we've got a really packed fall. Going to take some of the summer off.
Wait, did you mention Brazil? Brazil's the next one.
Brazil's the next one. It's just hacking. It's hanging out hacking. We're going to do mostly workshops. Super Testnet's coming down. I'm flying in this guy from Israel named Nadav, who's got some really great projects he's been working on for years. He's not really well known, but I think he's really great. I think I talked Jeff G over from the Nostr side is working on this cool white noise protocol about how to do basically how to do group chats on Nostr privately, but scales to thousands of people. They don't have this right now, so he's working on that. I'm hoping I'll get to hack with him on that.
So if you want to hack and nerd out in Brazil, then that's
next month. Yeah.
Okay, cool. But mining in Austin, and then
we're gonna have 4 events in the fall because I'm crazy. We're gonna be at Riga talking about privacy and freedom. So that'll be a privacy.
I also want to do that one. I love to be a privacy girl myself. Okay, yeah, I'm ready.
Istanbul for scaling Bitcoin. So hopefully do a ZKP summit and get maybe some layer 2
You should hit up the Citria guys.
They're already on board.
They're on board.
Find it. Okay, they're helping me organize that one. So I'm really happy to have their help.
Awesome.
So that'll be in hopefully early September when the weather's the best in Istanbul. We'll be there to check it out. Early October, so this is a streak of a lot of work, but early October we'll be back in Berlin the 2nd to 4th doing Lightning and programmable payments will be the theme of that one.
Cool.
And then I'm hoping in Taipei we'll be out. In December we'll be in Taipei, Taiwan. So we'll have our first Asia conference and we'll be talking about sovereignty. So
hell yeah.
Multi-sigs. Hopefully we'll get the Fedi guys there to talk about
Cashu would shine there.
Cashu would be great, self-sovereign stuff. So
damn, I love it. Okay. So but basically you got Austin in May, Taiwan in December, but then in the fall you basically have a string of options in Europe.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool. So,
coming out.
Something for everyone. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. This was super, super fun. Cool. I actually am going to have FOMO because now it's hard to pick which of the Bitcoin plus conferences I want to go to. But I will say I have a soft spot for the mining and the privacy. Yeah, so I'm excited about that.
Should be good, yeah.
Thank you so much. This was so fun. As always, yeah, I love having you here. So
yeah, thanks
for coming. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.